Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never imagined the day would come when I would hear her name and feel nothing but cold clarity. Her name was Melissa, 38, sharp, intoxicating, always leaving a trace of chaos behind her. We had been married for 12 years, shared 2 kids, a mortgage, and a kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. I worked hard, came home tired but present, and tried to give her every piece of comfort she wanted. I thought that was enough. I thought it would always be enough. That belief shattered the night. She came back from her cousin's wedding. I remember the text she sent on the way home, casual, almost playful. "You won't believe what happened tonight." I didn't yet know that the words were meant to lure me into a trap of realization. The first thing I noticed when she walked through the door was the faint scent of perfume that didn't belong to her usual favorites. It was rich, overpowering, something that hinted at someone else. Her smile was brighter than usual, eyes sparkling, but it wasn't the same warmth I had known. It was dangerous, teasing, as if she was proud of what she had done without even saying it. I didn't confront her that night. I watched quietly, feeling a pit open in my stomach that refused to close. Dinner was an awkward dance of clinks and half-smiles. I tried to joke, tried to touch her arm lightly, but she recoiled, laughed nervously, and leaned away. Something in her had changed, and I knew I wasn't going to like the answer when it finally revealed itself. The next morning, I discovered the messages on her phone. She had been discreet, careful, but the traces were unmistakable. Photos, texts, calls. A man named Jason, a stranger to our life, now threaded through every moment she claimed was hers alone. I stared at the screen, heart-thudding disbelief, and then a slow, numbing recognition. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was habitual, a betrayal that had been growing in plain sight, hidden beneath her laughter and the life I had built around her. I thought of the kids, Emma and Liam, 12 and 10, old enough to sense tension, to ask questions I couldn't yet answer. I wonder how much they had noticed, what little crumbs they might have pieced together. I thought of the small joys we used to share, Saturday pancakes, bedtime stories, Sunday walks, now contaminated by the shadow of someone else. And then I remembered the countless times I had turned a blind eye, excused her absences, smiled when she flirted with her phone, hoping it was just imagination. But imagination didn't leave evidence. Betrayal did. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I waited. I watched. Every interaction became a series of tests. Did she flinch when I touched her? Did she check her phone a little too often? Did she hesitate when answering questions about her day? Each tiny sign was a blade cutting through my patience, my loyalty, my disbelief. And then came the message that ended the quiet torture. I can't stop thinking about him. I don't know why I stayed so long. I'm sorry. That evening, I made a decision I had been wrestling with for weeks without knowing it. Divorce. Not the messy, shouting kind. Not the sudden confrontation in the kitchen that ruins everything forever. Quiet, calculated, controlled. Just me, my dignity, and a clear understanding that she had chosen a path where I no longer had a place. I spent that night gathering myself, going through our shared accounts, our documents, anything that mattered. I thought of her entitled daughter, Sophia, 17, who had mirrored her mother's manipulative tendencies. I realized that any attempts at normalcy with her were futile. She had been spoiled, shielded from accountability, raised to believe she was entitled to everyone else's sacrifice. The thought of her inheriting this chaos, of expecting me to bow to her whims, as I once had to Melissa, filled me with a cold resolve I had never felt before. The following week was a study in restraint. I didn't confront her directly. I didn't need to. She was careful, aware enough to maintain appearances in front of the kids, friends, and neighbors. But I knew the truth. I watched her from a distance, cataloged her movements, and planned. This wasn't about revenge. It was about cutting ties cleanly, severing the parts of my life that had been poisoned. The house, the routines, even the small details of our marriage, they all had to be neutralized. I needed distance, certainty, and above all, closure. There was a moment, a quiet Tuesday evening, When I watched her leave for another weekend with him, the way she had last summer with Jason, the kids were with a friend, oblivious to the storm, and I stood at the doorway, gripping the doorframe. I didn't feel sadness. Not yet. I felt something sharper, clarity, the recognition that I had allowed myself to be complicit in my own erasure for too long. That night, I made a call. Not to her, not to Jason. To my attorney. Words were sparse, deliberate. I want to file for divorce. Immediately, the shock didn't come from the filing. It came from the calm I felt afterward. Walking to the living room, watching her heels click down the hall as if she had never been unfaithful, I realized something vital. The life I had been living was a shadow of my own creation. She had lived, yes, but I had been surviving. And now, finally, I was ready to reclaim my life, piece by piece, step by step. The next steps would not be simple. There would be negotiations, confrontations, emotional confrontations with the daughter, and a public unraveling of everything we had built. But for the first time in years, I felt the sharp edge of anticipation rather than despair. Melissa had chosen him. Sophia had inherited entitlement, and I had chosen clarity. The storm was coming, and I was ready. The next morning, Melissa was gone before the kids woke up, her car already humming down the street as if she had no idea the life she had taken for granted was slipping through her fingers. I stayed behind, methodical, quiet. I made breakfast for Emma and Liam, packed their school bags, and kissed them goodbye without a word about the storm brewing in our lives. They didn't need fear yet. They needed normalcy, even if it was borrowed. By mid-morning, my attorney called. Papers were drawn, signatures arranged, and the divorce filing was officially submitted. I had requested sole custody of the kids for the time being, arguing that the home environment she had created, riddled with secrets, deceit, and distraction, was no longer suitable. The judge granted temporary custody. And just like that, a measure of control returned to my hands. I felt a cold satisfaction, not of cruelty, but of justice. Then came the real challenge. Sophia, 17, bright, sharp, and arrogant. Melissa had raised her to believe that charm and tantrums could bend the world. I had let it slide for too long, but that era ended now. When I confronted her, it was blunt. Your mother made choices. I will not be complicit in enabling them anymore. You will respect the rules of this house, or you will not live here. Her face contorted in anger, disbelief, and for a moment, I thought she would scream, but she didn't. Instead, she stared at me, calculating, realizing that the pedestal her mother had built for her had collapsed overnight. The following weeks were tense. I kept communication with Melissa strictly through legal channels, each message precise, cold, and immovable. She tried subtle manipulation, hints of charm, the occasional sobbing call to friends, but I remained impervious. The realization that I was no longer accessible as her safety net sent her into quiet desperation. The daughter tried everything. Temper, tears, rebellion. But my boundaries were firm. The dynamic had shifted entirely in the house. Once ruled by fear of angering her mother, now at order and certainty. Then, 3 months later, the news arrived. Melissa had moved in with Jason, his apartment small, cramped, and temporary. She complained to mutual acquaintances, bragged about her freedom. But I knew the truth. He worked long hours, had no patience for drama, and Melissa, for all her charm, had no independence. She was suddenly vulnerable, exposed, and realizing that the life she had discarded was not guaranteed elsewhere. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. I simply watched, detached. The divorce finalized in 6 months. Melissa received what the law mandated, nothing more. Sophia, initially bitter, had no choice but to adapt. Over time, she learned that life did not bend to entitlement. She still complained, still tested boundaries, but she began to understand that the world, unlike her mother's fantasy, demanded respect, accountability, and effort. One evening, as I tucked Liam into bed, he whispered, "Dad, will Mom come back?" I paused, feeling the weight of the past years in that simple question. "No, buddy," I said gently, "but that's okay. We're okay. We have each other, and that's what matters." Emma, older and wiser, nodded silently beside him. In that moment, I realized that the life I had been too loyal to salvage had been rebuilt in the space of absence. Love, attention, and presence were now ours to define, not dictated by betrayal or manipulation. Months later, I stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, watching my kids do homework, laughing quietly at something on the table. The house was still theirs, their stability intact. Melissa called once, briefly, pleading for additional support, threatening minor legal disputes. I referred her to her lawyer. Each call, each email, reminded me how completely I had detached from the chaos she brought. There was no anger, no desire to punish, only recognition that she had made her choices, and I had made mine. The closure came unexpectedly, on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Sophia approached me cautiously. "Dad, I just want to say thanks for sticking to your word, for not letting her chaos run our lives." Her voice was tentative, but her eyes held respect, something I hadn't expected so soon. I nodded, swallowing the lingering bitterness. "You're welcome. It's time we live our own lives, not someone else's mistakes." Life moved forward. I focused on my career, the kids, and myself. I met someone new months later, cautiously, aware of the fragility of trust. But the experience had hardened me, sharpened my instincts, and clarified what I would never accept again. Melissa's betrayal was a wound, but it was also a boundary, a line in the sand. She had taught me, inadvertently, the value of decisiveness and self-respect. I never attended her funeral. When the news came that she had died suddenly, a heart attack in Jason's apartment, I felt only a fleeting acknowledgement. There was no grief, only a factual recognition. Life moves on, justice or closure often comes without ceremony, and the world does not wait for sentiment. Her daughter, now grown into responsibility, no longer depended on me. The cycle of entitlement ended with my decisive boundaries. In the end, the house, the kids, and my dignity remained untouched. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the shock, all transformed into clarity, into freedom. I had survived not by clinging, not by pleading, but by choosing decisiveness, presence, and moral clarity. And that choice, cold, sharp, unwavering, was mine, entirely mine.